Hey everybody, it's Frankie-Lou. I'm coming to you today from the greenhouse in the sky, where I'm dealing with what might look like a little bit of recycling, but it's actually getting started with my winter sowing season. Winter sowing is something that I have been doing with a great deal of success for several years now. I got started with winter sowing on my Alberta homestead, where I deal with Chinook conditions, and I also do winter sowing here now at the Golden homesteads. These are both zone 3 areas, so pretty harsh winter conditions. And I really find that winter sowing is one of those wonderful ways that I can help to extend my season by giving my seedlings a head start so that I have nice, hardy seedlings that are adjusted to the climate that I have here without having to deal with all the fuss of having stuff inside. It's far less work because I don't have to worry about watering frequently. I get better seedlings and I don't have to harden off. For me, that's one of the major reasons why I love doing winter sowing. Now, I've had a lot of questions recently about timing of winter sowing because, as I said, I got started in Chinook conditions, zone 3, which is a very unique timing that you have to deal with because we deal with erratic winter conditions, and I usually don't get started on my hardy perennials when I'm in Alberta with those Chinook conditions until mid-February. But I'm also growing in Golden here. We are really planning to extend our exterior gardens here and also start a food forest here this year. So I have a whole lot of planting to do, and hardy perennials, especially edible hardy perennials, are something that I can start here now in Golden. This is because I don't face Chinooks in Golden. I also am going to be doing some of my winter sowing in Alberta, in Springbank, in the Chinook zone, and I'll be starting those in about a month. One of the reasons why winter sowing is so great is because of cold stratification, which is when cold and moisture working together help to break that seed coat so you get better germination rates. So I want to make sure that I have enough time for those hardy perennials because those are the ones that do tend to need that cold stratification to get that. So you want to start at least 6 to 8 weeks before that last hard frost because most plants that require cold stratification, and of course there's exceptions, but most plants that require cold stratification can get it within that 6 to 8 week period. Does that make sense? Now, I then would move on to my vegetables that are hardy and my hardy annual flowers at that 4 to 6 week period. Okay, towards my last frost. I would tend to put out my tender vegetables and tender annuals just 4 weeks before that last frost. So I'm hoping that that makes sense there. I found that this timing works here in Golden. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I know it's confusing for those of you who follow me, but I'm hoping that you can see how plants grow in two different conditions that both just happen to be zone 3. So I'm finding it very fascinating and I'm loving this experimenting. The hardy perennial that I'm going to be setting up in my winter sowing jugs today is sorrel. I use a ton of this stuff. It's one of my favorites. It has a super, super tart lemony taste. I've got tons of videos about it if you do want to see it, but that's what I'm going to get started with today. For those of you who are new to winter sowing, it's pretty easy. What you do is you take your good old milk jug. I do recommend getting started with milk jugs. I do use alternate containers as well, particularly for things like winter sowing in place. I love using these water cooler bottles for that. I'll do a demo on this particular preparation as we are going through the season. But for today, I'm going to just quickly show you how to make a wonderful winter sowing mini greenhouse out of your standard milk jug. This is really very easy, but I thought there was a couple things I want to discuss with you just so that it makes absolute sense. First of all, you're going to need your tools. Get yourself some nice clean milk jugs. Usually what I do is I try to rinse these as soon as they're empty. Having a teenage son, I go through a lot of this. I'm going to do over 100 of these here in Golden, even with this greenhouse, because for plants that are going out in the garden and not growing here in the greenhouse, I do find that this is the best way to go. I also find that if you put the lid on the milk jug while you're poking your holes with my favorite tool, there are lots of different tools you can use, but I do love my good old corkscrew, that it holds its shape and it doesn't collapse as much as it would with if I was just trying to use an open milk jug. I like to poke 3 holes in the bottom of each quadrant here. Proper drainage is essential. I also like to poke a couple holes within an inch on the side, just to make sure that drainage happens properly. Lots of holes, lots of drainage. That's really important. Now I'm going to open this up. If this has collapsed, a quick blow will get it so that it's puffed up again. Then we have to open this baby up. I like to cut my milk jugs from either side of the handle so I have a nice hinge. You want to make sure that you're making it deep enough. So you can see I have a nice hinge here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it with a good quality soil. Normally when you're planting seeds to get started inside, you tend to use a base that doesn't have any fertilizer in it. Now we are going to be expecting this seedling though to remain in here until it's time to transplant. So there is going to be none of that potting up with the winter sowing. You're going to keep that seedling in here for the whole time. Therefore, you do need to provide those seeds and the subsequent seedlings with some nourishment. I like to use a lightly fertilized organic medium. The one that I've found best works for me over the many years I've been doing this is this organic herb and veggie pro mix. I just like it. It has a nice organic fertilizer. It's light enough to allow for good germination, and then it also nourishes my seedlings long enough. So you want to make sure your soil is well moistened in advance. The reason for this is cold stratification requires moisture as well. Just as you would with any time that you're planting seeds, there has to be good contact with the moisture and the seeds in order for germination to take place. It's not going to take place for a long time. Now, a lot of people, when they start winter sowing for the first time, think that they're going to see seedlings sooner as opposed to later. But honestly, I'm putting these out today. It's mid-January. I probably won't be seeing any growth for several months. And that's a good thing. I'm just letting Mother Nature do the hard work and having her handle that cold stratification of my seeds over several months of working together with moisture and cold to break that seed coat. I'm going to fill this with several inches, almost to the top, of slightly compacted good soil. Today I'm using seeds that I've collected myself from my own plants. If you do have seed packets that have instructions for the depth and the placing, it's a good idea to follow those. I obviously don't have that with my own seeds, but I do know that one thing that a lot of people do with winter sowing, and it causes a lot of problems for them at the start, is they overplant the seeds. You really just want to put a light sprinkling in here because this isn't actually a very large area. I usually aim to plant quite sparsely because it will work. A lot of people overplant because they think there's no way this is going to work. So they overplant and then they end up with way too many seedlings that get damaged when you're trying to separate them and put them in the ground. I'm just going to sprinkle about 12 altogether of my sorrel seeds in here. I'm going to put just a light sprinkling of dirt on top because these seeds do not require a lot of depth to germinate. Then comes a really important part, labeling. I tend to use those grease markers that you get for cow tags. I know that not everybody can find those, but they're great. That marker will last through all harsh winter conditions. If you can't find that, you probably can find an acrylic paint pen. You can get them at most craft stores. What I do is I cut up yogurt containers to create little tags. I'm going to label this sorrel. I'm going to make 4 of these up today. Just making these tags up in advance is really helpful for 2 reasons. One, it saves me a whole lot of time later when it comes time to transplant my plants. But another reason is I tuck it up into this handle here, okay? By doing that, I am stopping seedlings from growing up into the handle because that'll happen. And it also means that I can see from the outside, no matter what's going on with the labels, if they happen to get washed off, I can still see that this is sorrel, because it says so on my label in the handle, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna label here at the top. I over label because I've had them all disappear before. There's really no such thing as over labeling. I also label at the bottom. I don't like playing what's this mystery plant when it comes springtime. I've done it though a few times. Then I close it up. I sometimes also because I do like to experiment and see, and that's how I know how this timing works. I do tend to write the date on here. By writing that date on there, I do have a good idea of when stuff is gonna happen. And I do, like, sometimes I'll plant things, the same plant several times. And I can keep a record and know to myself what's the best time to plant a certain plant here in my region. Next up, I wanna use some duct tape. This is where you don't wanna cheap out. You wanna get decent duct tape. Do not get the super heavy duty stuff though, or else you'll never be able to take it off when it comes time to remove that tape in the spring. I find that good quality duct tape, not the dollar store duct tape. Got this, you know, at Canadian Tire. And then you want to tape up your jug well so that it'll stay closed throughout the harsh winter conditions. I'm just making sure that that tape is on there well and has good contact and is stuck to my jug so that it'll stay in place as long as I need it to in the spring. Now we're going to quickly go outside the greenhouse and I can show you a little bit about placement of your milk jugs. Now we're outside and I can show you where I'm going to place my little milk jugs. I like to have a well-exposed snowbank. That honestly is the best case scenario. You don't have to do that. I have also done winter sowing on decks where there's no snow. But if you do have a nice big snowbank like this that we have in front of our greenhouse that's well exposed, you don't want it to be covered by an eave because you do want your milk jugs to have exposure to the snow, the rain, and some sunlight. You do want to have it a little protected though from wind, if that's a problem where you are, and obviously from things like rambunctious dogs who might think that this would be a fun chew toy. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to wait on, see, it's pretty deep. Wait on in. Ugh. And I'm going to nestle them in the snow. I like to bring the snow right up to start. All right. And I'm going to leave them. That pile will be growing. And as the season progresses, I will show you some tips on watering and how to maintain. But honestly, I won't have to do anything with those except maybe shovel a little snow onto it for the next few months. So a little recap here. When it comes to timing, your conditions do affect when to put things out. If you're in a harsh winter climate like I have here and in Alberta, you definitely don't want to start putting out your more tender stuff until closer to the end of the season. Now, with your hardy perennials though, if you live somewhere that doesn't have erratic conditions, it can come out now. And I'll be putting out things like poppies and lovage and other hardy perennials very soon. Make sure that you leave your lids open so that your milk jug has an opportunity to get that precipitation that it requires. And just have fun with it. If you haven't tried winter sowing yet, I hope you will give it a try. It's super fun. It's almost magical to see those seeds germinate in their little milk jugs. And you're going to be super pleased once it comes time to putting them in the ground because the amount of work it saves you in hardening off is amazing. As always, I hope you'll ask lots of questions because it helps me to create the content that you want. And as always, I hope you take this chance to grow together today. Have a good one.